And I'm calling the member for Strathfield.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I give notice that this House, one, notes the reckless privatisation agenda of the previous government resulted in the private ownership and control of major toll roads, energy assets and even a hospital emergency department. Notes that this has led to soaring tolls, energy bills and serious concerns about the quality of acute healthcare. And 3, commends the Minns Labor government for taking decisive action to protect essential public services, including enshrining the public ownership of Sydney Water in the New South Wales Constitution and banning the further privatisation of acute health services. Madam Speaker, what we saw in 12 years when those opposite were in government was a privatisation fetish. They were really into it. They were really into it, Madam Speaker. They loved it. It was a wholesale, ideological program of selling off essential public infrastructure with no mandate and no accountability. And you can kind of understand the thinking. They thought that privatisation was a golden goose that would fund their singular pathological obsession with transport mega projects. We'd be rolling nude in cash, Madam Speaker, was the theory. And it was also a great ideological fit with their conservative ideology that governments can't run anything, that governments are bloated and inefficient, and that the private sector would come in like a white knight and make our lives better. That was the theory, Madam Speaker. And the promises, of course, was that services would cost less, that there would be expanded services and that our lives would improve. The promise was that by selling our house, we would become richer. But, Madam Speaker, what did we get? We got complete disaster, and not just economic disaster. We got ruined lives. We got the most tolled city on earth. A minimum of $123 billion will be paid by Sydney Motorists and Tolls to 2060. And Transurban, having snaffled up 11 out of 13 of our toll roads in New South Wales, is now a $45 billion, $45 billion market cap company. That is more than 10% of New South Wales net wealth. And look, I've got the Transurban annual report here. It's very interesting. It's very interesting reading. In the 2025 financial year, from Sydney alone, $1.85 billion in toll revenue. That's toll revenue that could have come into government coffers. And $1.45 billion in operating EBITDA. That's basically operating profit before interest, amortisation and depreciation. So that money could have been used to fund public services. And can I say, Madam Speaker, looking at this annual report, it's a pretty good business. It's a pretty good business. $1.8 billion of revenue, $1.4 billion of operating EBITDA. That's about an 80% operating EBITDA margin. That's a pretty good business.
Not bad.
Pretty good business. And what did those opposite do when they were in government? They flogged it off. They sold it off. And can I say, not only was this wrong and misled in theory, but in the execution, there was also, I can say, every year, tolls under the contract, tolls can rise the greater of 4% or inflation. So it doesn't matter if inflation is negative, Transurban get to put up the tolls by 4%. So, you know what? You can't lose.
No.
You can't lose. As a shareholder, as Transurban, you can't lose. Who loses? The taxpayers of New South Wales. Because how do they fund those toll increases? New South Wales motorists have to pay for them. And I note that in the investment thesis, in the annual report, in the investment thesis, our investment proposition, so this is basically Transurban's pitch about why people should invest in them. It says here, inflation-linked toll escalations. Madam Speaker, inflation-linked toll escalations, which basically means that they can't lose. But underlying this is the fact that Transurban is a publicly listed company, which means, generally speaking, they have to grow their earnings every single quarter, otherwise their share price gets smashed. How do they grow their earnings every single quarter? By jacking up prices or reducing costs, Madam Speaker. And how are those prices jacked up? Again, by increasing tolls and putting additional burdens on New South Wales taxpayers in a cost of living crisis, Madam Speaker. So this is just tolls, Madam Speaker. I will let the speakers after me talk about energy assets and talk about health. But I just want to go to health because I'm chairing the inquiry into the Northern Beaches Hospital. And I don't want to go into the details of that inquiry, except to say what happened at Northern Beaches Hospital, if you cut it all away, is there was a public emergency department where people's lives hung in the balance, and it was put in the hands not just of a private company, but of a foreign private equity leveraged buyout fund. Madam Speaker, I mean, really, what could go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? Well, things did go wrong, Madam Speaker, and people died, kids died, and that's why, as the New South Wales Men's Labor government, we have passed Joe's Law to make sure that never again will there be the privatisation of acute health services, and that is why we have put into the New South Wales Constitution protection against the privatisation of Sydney Water and Hunter Water, because we believe fundamentally that public assets belong to the public, and you cannot reconcile the fundamental contradiction of putting public interest in the hands of profit-making private organisations. Exactly right. I commend the motion to the House.